Welcome to another lesson of Mr.Lakatos Teaches Science, and today's topic is friction. Okay? Friction is a force that opposes the motion of an object. So whenever two things are rubbing against each other, there is some friction that's created. So if you take a soccer ball and you kick it, eventually the ball will stop because friction between the ball and the grass will slow it down. Now, how can we measure friction? Well, we came up with a little experiment to say the difference between different surfaces. Generally, the rougher a surface, the more friction there is. So for this, I took some wood, and what I did is I covered them with different materials. One piece of wood is covered in carpet, one piece of wood in wax paper, one piece of wood in sandpaper, and the last one is covered in aluminum foil. So the question for this experiment is which surface will have the most friction? Will it be the carpet, wax paper, sandpaper, or aluminum foil? Now, to test that out, what we're going to use is a spring scale, and we're going to use a weight. We're going to slide the weight across a surface with the spring scale and measure how much force is required to slide the object across a surface. The more force that you use, the more friction between the weight and the surface. So, first thing before we do this, our hypothesis would be which of these four surfaces would have the most friction, okay? So you think about which one. Now, what we're gonna do is we'll start with wax paper. Wax paper is pretty smooth. So we got the piece of wood with wax paper, we take the weight, we slide it across, and we measure how much force we need. So on the spring scale, it says we need about 0.8 newtons of force to slide the weight across the wax paper. Next, we'll do the aluminum foil. So again, we repeat the process, slide it across with the spring scale, and we measure. And for the aluminum foil, it's only using 0.6 newtons of force to slide the weight across the aluminum foil. For our third, we will use the wood that's covered in carpet. And we put the weight on, and when we go to slide it, okay, the carpet requires 1 newton of force to slide the weight across. So the carpet has more friction than the aluminum foil or the wax paper. And finally, we will use sandpaper. Sandpaper is very rough. So we put on the weight and we go to slide across. And for the sandpaper, we need 2 newtons of force to slide the weight across the sandpaper. So since the sandpaper needed the most force, sandpaper creates the most friction. Now, normally friction is bad, okay? All moving parts, whenever they rub together, there is friction, and the friction will wear the parts apart. In cars, they use things like oil to reduce the amount of friction so your car doesn't break. Friction is also useful. Friction between when you walk, you need friction to walk. If you ever walked on ice, ice is very difficult to walk on. You slip a lot because there's very little friction. The shoes we wear, their bottoms of the soles create friction between us and whatever we're walking on to prevent us from falling. So, to review, friction is a force that opposes the motion of an object. Friction happens when objects are rubbing against each other. Friction is both harmful, such in something like an engine or anything that's moving where it could wear apart and break, or it can be useful, such as when we're walking or riding a bike to make sure we don't slip and fall. So that right there is friction. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. Next, we'll move on to Newton's 3 laws of motion.